I'm honored today to have one of my oldest friends in the e-commerce world, Danny McMillan, join us today for a different type of conversation. We talk about entrepreneurship a lot. We talk about Amazon a lot, specifically, creating a big brand and helping people create businesses. But this conversation today goes much deeper than that. It goes into mental health. It goes into how to be a better person. So we talk about self growth. Danny has been studying this at a very high level for a long time. He has a long background in the entertainment industry and has been a consistent fixture in the e-commerce world for many, many years now, for as long as I can remember. And at the end of the day, if you don't have your mental health, you don't have anything. Now, we're going to get into some pretty deep topics here. There might be a trigger warning because we are going to talk about some subjects that are uncomfortable when it comes to the way men think and behave, what we're capable of, and the way that we treat women.
Yeah.
But that, to me, is needed. There are a lot of people that have gotten famous off of a message that, to me, is dangerous for a lot of men to go out and follow. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Danny, thank you, my friend, for joining me today. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you give just a brief introduction about yourself, and then we'll talk a little bit about your journey that brought you to this mindset that you currently have. Maybe a little bit about what you're writing about and how you've evolved mentally and physically over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in people for a very, very long time, and I love people. So you understand people's behaviors, their patterns, their, for a better word, body language, and how you can empathize and stuff with people as well. And when you look online and we look today, again, we're going to go into trigger warnings here, you'll see a lot of content online and you see a situation where you have this big thing and it's social media. And this is where people need to separate social media to the real world. But if you look at some of the women's space on the more ideological level, and the male space goes on TikTok, and you'll go on to YouTube and places like that, and you see a lot of content where men are trash, women are this, right? And they're setting this adversary between men and women are better together. But there's a couple of things there. This comes from unhealed trauma. You were never born to dislike women, okay? You were never born to think of women this way or men in this way. It would have happened to you from your caregivers, or it would have come from a relationship. So when you say all men are toxic and all women are that, no, they're not. It's come from unhealed behaviors. Then you get into things like pathologies, like narcissism. You've got the spectrum there of the cluster B spectrum. Narcissism's on the spectrum. There's 4 parts to it. So depends where you get your information from. If it's the DSM-5, etc. You've got NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. Then you've got histrionic personality disorder. And then you've got psychopathy, which is also known as antisocial personality disorder. So people run around and throw these words like narcissist and stuff. Most people, if you say to someone, all right, what's a narcissist? Tell me the 9 traits and how many do you need to confirm to get a clinical diagnosis for it? And then they'll look at you blankly because they'll say, she's a narcissist because I don't like her, she turned me down. He's a narcissist because he stood me up on the date. It's got silly. Do you understand? But that's a pathology, right? That's a fixed sense of self. And people need to have a healthy sense of self, whereas these guys are down-regulated on this. It's a very complex pathology, and it comorbids. So you could be, if you're, say, what's the word, we're looking for. You could be a mixture of a narcissist and a psychopath, or you could have borderline personality and some narcissism as well. And often it gets misdiagnosed. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there. And when you listen to any information online, right, generally what you're doing is you're tuning an algorithm to you. That algorithm is purposefully, the most powerful algorithm on the planet right now is TikTok. And you think they're eating everyone else, they're eating Facebook and everyone for lunch. And because they're out of China, there's an attack on TikTok, right? They're saying all these, these things in Congress about TikTok. But really, Silicon Valley's been having their lunch eaten because everything is swaying over TikTok. Now, all of these companies have what's called attention engineers, right? So what they're looking is maximize your attention. So attention plus eyeballs, right, equals money. So these algorithms are designed to meet all of your desires and shame and everything you don't like about yourself and keep feeding you that information. Okay. And then what happens is you end up living in your own, it's like a filter bubble. So you live in your own world.
An echo chamber, right?
It's an echo chamber, but it's personalized to you. So what happens is what you consume, the more you consume of something, the more it wants to feed you, whether that's good or bad. And then what happens is people's consumption of this content, if they don't take a step back and think for themselves, it can adjust who they are. Do you see what I mean? So then what you've seen is you've seen people have come along, I won't name names, everyone knows who I'm going to be talking about now, who will come along and people go, how did this guy become like this and why does he have such a big following? And the reason is because they've tapped in to a series of men. There'll be some on the female side for who women follow, it could be Cardi B or something like that. But on that side, you've got a person that is stepped in and he's filled a void because there's a lot of differentialized men, especially young men.
I want to go deeper. I definitely want to go deeper into this disenfranchised group of men. Now, the first thing I'll say is a lot of this behavior that you're talking about is the result of options technology and the global spectrum. And when we lived in a small village, hundreds or even thousands of years ago, being agreeable was good, right? So if you caused waves, if you caused problems, it was a bad thing. Now, there's a lot that is ingrained in us instinctually around this. Now, what's happening is that we've got an entire generation of people who are growing up now in their teens and 20s, right? And there's a massive issue there, like Chamath just pointed out. I follow him on Twitter about how the death rate of these 30-something-year-olds is off the charts compared to historical figures.
75% of all suicides are men.
Yeah, and there's a lot to that. And I lost a friend last year to that same issue, but two friends actually. So the question is, what I'm trying to say is that I think the answer, one of the problems, is that we are not taught to self-reflect about issues and things that happen to us. We are raised to always blame others. We are raised to believe that if anything bad happens to us, it couldn't possibly be our own fault. That it's that person or that company that did that
situation. So the outcome,
or that situation, or luck, or whatever it is, and the proper mindset often is to say, what could I have done better? What was in my control versus what was out of my control? That dichotomy of control is lost on this generation, and has been known for thousands of years. And oftentimes you have to always pause and ask yourself that question: what can I control? And oftentimes the only thing you control is your own thoughts, your own feelings about a situation.
There's a handful, right? You got your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, and
that's it.
And what you say pretty much is the only thing you control. And what
That's it.
you're mentioning about there is called external locus of control. So the person blames the world externally for everything that happens to them. Someone with internal locus of control understands that they start with the self, and that what you need is a healthy sense of self.
I love
And if
it.
you've got a
And
healthy sense of self, there you go.
yeah, and I think that I study a lot of Stoicism and a lot of these ancient Stoic philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, and a lot of what they talk about is understanding that life is going to happen one way or another to you. We're all going to die. That's the one consistent thing that's going to happen. And we're all going to have some shitty situations. We're all going to have sickness and death in our lives. We're all going to have things that happen that are not ideal and go along to the plan. The key there, though, is to understand and be grateful for the opportunity to even be experiencing that, because oftentimes that leads to better growth. The impediment to action begets action. What gets in the way becomes the way, right? So, what we need to understand is when we reflect, it's not to react and be reactionary to the external factors. It's to internalize it and to understand it, and then to understand how to move forward and how to feel about it. And I love what you're saying here, and I'm gonna let you continue. I mean, the blend between this philosophy of how to think, how to feel, and how to react, and how to treat others, and how to treat yourself, and modern psychology, to me, is a message that people need to hear, and that you've been studying, and that you've become an authority in.
What I discuss, and which will come up in the book, is covering all of these different factors, because it isn't just about getting in the gym. So going back to Stoicism, like you mentioned earlier. Now, if you go onto Instagram and you see a reel, you'll see Thomas Shelby, right? He's in there and they'll talk about being stoic like Thomas Shelby. That's all well and good if you're a psychopath, because a psychopath could be cold as ice, but you're not a psychopath, right? And it's great to be stoic, because some people go, oh, if you're stoic, you're toxic, which is completely not true as well, because people talk about suppressing emotions, right? So if we broke down that, if you want to be truly stoic, but you've got childhood wounds or you've got triggers you haven't dealt with, it's going to be very hard for you to sit there and be stoic, because what you're doing inside is being really angry, but you look stoic on the outside. What you want to be is stoic, and you be indifferent to a point. Now, in order to get there, the first thing is, what are your triggers? So when you kick off, or when you don't like something, and when you project on someone, that's a trigger. You can sit with that trigger and go, what can I learn about this at the moment? Then when you trace it back, you then heal that wound. Then you throw in some what's called emotional literacy. Now, with emotional literacy, it's understanding the full spectrum of emotions. It's not about being shutting down completely. It's about understanding what those emotions are. So if you deal with your triggers and you have emotional literacy feeds into emotional intelligence, then you become naturally stoic, because you've dealt with the trigger. Do you understand? So when someone shares on social media a psychopath, I know it's a fictional character that goes around cutting people and killing people, it's like, yeah, you want to be like Thomas Shelby, you want to be stoic. It's like, yeah, but he's a fucking psychopath. You're not. Yeah. You're emotionally dysregulated, right? You need to deal with your people-pleasing skills. You need to deal with some of your anger problems. So if you deal with all those,
but as men, we have naturally that fight or flight, and we have a lot of anger. We have a lot of thoughts internally that are dangerous, right? Like if we acted on them.
Absolutely. But that's where the control comes from, emotional literacy as well, like you said.
Yeah, and it takes a high level of EQ and development. So one of the things that I attribute to the success that I have with my wife, we work together in business, is that I was older when I met her. I was more mature. I knew what I wanted more in life. But when she would tell me something critical about myself, about me, the natural reaction if I was 5 years younger or 10 years younger, would have been like, why are you insulting me? Like, this is, what are you, I don't need this shit. Right? You can't be right. And instead, what it becomes is she right? Maybe she is right. What could I have done better? Right? And her understanding, because of different cultures, her being from China, the way she was raised, her environment, her culture versus ours, and me growing up in a household where I didn't have to study very hard and I was praised for it. Instead of, I didn't have to study very hard, I should have been pushed harder. Right? Um, if there was something that went wrong, it wasn't my fault. Right? The entitlement that we were raised with, the not really needing or much.
But that's the thing. If you look at the cultures, two different things. But I'm not sure if it still stands true today, and you can do a search afterwards. I think if you're talking that side of the world, if you type, what's the most popular searched word over there would be money. Yeah. Over this way, it's going to be sex. That's the difference between the two. There's a different set of demands in terms of performance for children, and the way that the families are structured, the nuclear family, is a lot different to what it is in the West.
Well, they also manage money significantly better, right?
Absolutely.
So
they're producers, not consumers.
100%.
Yeah, I do. I cover this in the book, and as you know, my best friend is Kat Phipps. She's a qualified psychologist, and what I think the problem that we face with it, when I looked at it, in the last 30 years, we've never had this level of support, right, in terms of mental health, than we have done the last 30 years, yet that rate climbs. Okay, so let's split this into a couple of ways of looking at it. Now, I think it was Jung or Nietzsche, you can't quote me on this, but where talk therapy came from was one of those greats sat down and they had a lady come in, and she said, "Will you shut up and let me speak?" And then she spoke, and then she could exercise through speaking, right, through the talk therapy. She was able to feel much better about it, okay? And then from feeling much better about it, that relieves some of the symptoms. They could have a discussion, so it becomes talk therapy. Now, I'm using it in very, very basic terms here. Now, if you look at guys, right, most guys, it's not for them, I think, where the struggle comes. Let's say 90% of therapists are female, 10% are men. And I think the blockade that guys have stopped going, they don't understand the value of going to therapy because they don't want to sit down and talk about it because they've got a misrepresentation of what therapy is. Right?
They think it makes them weak.
It makes them weak. What they don't realize, this is a framework. Okay? If you say to a guy, look, you're depressed, we're going to heal you. It's going to take about a year, but if you work really hard, by November, you'll be golden. The guy goes, someone's told me we know how to fix it because I'm logical, and then by November, I'm going to be cured. As long as I work hard enough, I'll use logic here, therefore I go to therapy. But because with social media, and it's very uncool to go to therapy, to go through that, right? And there may be, you have to set a safe space for women. People don't understand the levels of safety. Guys only understand protection and provision. And even that's out of date now because women have very much entered the workforce since the mid-70s. Yeah. So when we look at this, I think the problem for guys is their attitude towards it because they think they're just going to sit around talking about their feelings. And if a guy gets vulnerable, what does he need? Safety. So if he can't open up to his friends, he's going to struggle to open up to his partner, and he may not open up to a female therapist. And there's some amazing ones out there because I've had them on my other podcast, and coaches, amazing. And I think there's that stigma around it which slows them down. They are scared to be vulnerable. Vulnerable means you need to have a safe space. And you say that to a masculine guy, they go, what do you fucking mean, a safe? Do you understand where I'm coming from? So you have to change the language for them. So when I explain to guys what emotional literacy is, instead of saying emotional literacy and making that the key point, what I say to them is, you've got anger problems. Would you like to resolve your anger problems? Because the default for most is anger. And that's the main thing, because that's the only emotion they think they feel. And it sounds better when you present emotional literacy to them by saying, do you want to deal with your anger? And then you go, yeah, it's called emotional literacy. And you throw in the emotional literacy after, once they're committed. So you're teasing it in a bit. Do you understand? And I think once you look on social, it's not just about.
Do you think that comes back down to the inability for men to be criticized because we're sensitive to that?
I think men and
because
women have
maybe
both
they feel like you're calling them stupid.
Yes, there's that. But both men and women can have problems with being criticized. They don't like take feedback.
Of course.
You know, it's so important when you speak to a lady is your tone. Sometimes you can say any words. It doesn't matter what the words are. The words are not heard. It's the tone. And I think that's where guys will struggle as well, is that you've got to adjust your tone, right? When you're speaking to people, because it creates an emotional reaction.
Not what you're saying, it's how you're saying.
It's how you say it is so important. And for all the women that I know, and I've got a lot of female friends, and they would actually say the same thing. But if a guy's not aware of, he's self-aware enough to say that, because I've been with my wife nearly 30 years. There are going to be times that I'm really tired and I might go, yeah, and the tone is just slightly, what's the matter? It's like nothing. And then it can go in because I'm not fully conscious. I'm not present with my wife.
I have the same exact issue sometimes where I get a little short. I get a little bit, and I have to pause.
Yeah.
And I take a deep breath, and I have to realize that it's not her fault.
It's not.
Right?
But what happens is our tone makes it about them. And when that does, then what happens, not only are you tired and you mistakenly used the wrong tone, right? You've also got now this to unpack. So you've created a worse situation. So you have to be conscious. And this is what presence is about. And I've said this to you about with Aidan. I remember you posting something, where should I take him? Presence over presence, because it's taken me 4 years to get Maya back. And we've got an amazing bond now, because I was that guy, and I'll cover this in the book. I was that guy when, back in 2010, broke and everything else, just working my ass off. I wasn't giving my daughter the time and attentions. And that's why I call it presence over presence. And what that means is if she speaks to me, I go, 1 second, I'll put my phone down and I go, you have my full attention. Because that is priceless to children,
Yeah. I find that so important. And whenever he's with me, I do my best to just disconnect, right? And I think that that's hard to do. Now, it's hard to balance that for men. And it was very interesting because I saw a Twitter rant the other day where there's a guy, I don't even know who he is, but he's famous for grinding and being a self-made, multimillionaire. And by all accounts has been very successful in business. And he's praised because at 18 years old, he has a daughter, and with, a high school sweetheart. It's not working out. He goes to New York and builds his way up. He does everything he needs to do. He lives in an apartment with 10 other guys. He's grinding, he's working, he builds a business and becomes successful ultimately. Now, the Twitter rant was on point because it was a woman saying, "Where's the kid?" Right? A woman would not be able to do what he did if she also had to take care of the kid, and he wouldn't be able to do it as a single father, right? And we take for granted sometimes as men the fact that we have the ability sometimes to disconnect from that and grind and work those 80, 90, 100-hour weeks, right? Because our child is being taken care of by a significant other or, by somebody else. The fact that I have Aiden with my ex, and Jennifer and I don't have any children yet, has allowed me that the few days I have Aiden every week, I'm packing in 100 hours into those 5, 6 days, right? Every single week. And then when I have them, I was in that habit in the beginning where I would always be on my phone. And it broke my heart when his mom called me and told me that he privately confided in her, that said, I love being with my dad, but he's always on his phone. Crushed me, right? And so presence over presence is a great way to put it, because just being present, just sharing something with him, road trip, sitting down, watching a show, sitting on the couch, taking him out to the park, hitting golf balls with him, fully immersed with him. To me, those are going to be core memories for him when he gets older. That I had the time that I separated, and when I was with him, I was with him.
Absolutely. And I share something as well with the situation with Maya, is that it got to such a point that she turned around and said to me, I hate you and I don't respect you. For a man and a father, they're probably the two worst things you want to hear from your daughter.
Wow.
And I said to her, I understand what you're saying, and it's my job to put this right, and give me time and I will. And so we did. And now
How old was she when she said that?
15.
Now, you've got teenage years.
Yeah.
You've got, teenage kids, let alone a teenage daughter, are hard to deal with anyway.
Mm.
But as a man, for you to hear that, and you're saying it's 4+ years ago.
Well, roughly 3.5 to 4 years ago. She's 18 now. So it's in and around that period. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're hearing that as a man. Now you got two paths there. You don't understand. Like one is, you don't understand. I'm doing this for you. You're ungrateful. Snowball, make it much worse. Or
take it on the chin and then
the path that you took, which is
take time. So we did a lot of work on boundaries, emotional literacy, CBT, because she was bullied and stuff at school, and I went to war with the school. That's the time to go to war. A lot of people talk about doing this, absolutely went out. I was prepared to go out on the shield because I was holding the school accountable. And through that was able to do a lot of stuff with her, because she felt physically, emotionally and mentally and spiritually safe with me. And going back to the points of safety, most women would need that. It doesn't matter how high powered they are. I've got lots of friends who are doing millions high powered, but there's nothing quite not like feeling safe on multiple levels. And if you can have that with your family, you create equilibrium, and then you create a peaceful environment. But you have to understand they actually exist, whereas most people don't. They go, I'll protect and provide, and then they get defensive because they're knocking their cods out, coming home exhausted, and they're like, well, what else do I need to do? And what they don't understand, they're not being present.
The scariest thing for me, though, thinking about with Aiden, with my son, is, 12. I imagine you were in a similar situation. You're a fighter. I'm a fighter, right? Like if push came to shove, I didn't mind going fisticuffs, right? Like I was getting in fights all the time, right? We handled it a different way back then. I don't think he's capable at the same level. As a matter of fact, it worries me to an extent. I got to get him some training, but I know how mean kids can be. The boys don't open up about those things as much. And that's what leads to those kids taking extreme measures, right? And oftentimes, you said the statistics about 75%. I imagine even in teens, it might even be higher than that, like kids, children's suicide.
Actually, I think it's higher in women, girls, sorry, young girls.
At a younger age?
Yeah, from about 8 till 14, because of the comparison issues with social media and the psychological bullying and stuff. So I think it's slightly higher there. Then men shift, it ebbs and flows. The biggest number is men over 40 that are divorced, from memory. But overall, it's 75%, but it does ebb and flow. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, especially when you think we're in a culture now, filters and things like that. So there's
puberty, you've got all those things happening, and development is at a different stages for different girls, and and comparison and not feeling beautiful and vulnerable, right? Like, and getting bullied. Yeah, like you said. I mean, I imagine, okay, yeah, it scares the shit out of me that I don't know sometimes what's going on if he doesn't open up and he's with his mom most of the time, right? And so, you know, and if he's being coddled on that end a little bit, because there's a different relationship for a boy with a mom and with a father. And if I can, I have to be very direct with him sometimes, and
No,
I
you
have
have
to get
to.
it out of him.
You have to, because the nurturing nature of a mother and father are slightly different, right? There was a clip that a lady did online. I'll try and pull it up so you can add the clip into so people can see it. So basically, they broke down men and women parenting. They said that with a woman and a child is an inward facing relationship in terms it's direct, and it's slightly different to the man's way of doing it. That whilst the nurturing there, right, and there's still the connection. At some point, the father turns around, instead of it being close like this, they go, and now it's time for you to go out and join the world. That's the slight difference there. Do you
Right.
understand? So our parenting are different, and that's the beauty of the masculine and the feminine. It's the beauty of a husband and wife if you structure it right, because the child benefits from all of it. Unfortunately, we live in a culture where marriage rates, 56% of divorce, are divorced. I cover this in the book as well because you've got attachment styles and attachment theory, which will probably play a big role in it. But generally speaking, it's what Aiden does have. He kind of has the best of both worlds because you are apart, unfortunately, or fortunately, depends how you judge it now. From his perspective, he's going to get 100% and 100%. Because when you're both
Right.
together and around, it maybe wasn't so much. So one thing I would say to you to give you a bit of advice, what you can say to him, and I've said this to Maya, you can come to me and say anything you want, share anything with me, and you won't be shamed and you will not be judged. But I'm giving you the opportunity to open up on all these things and you will not be judged, and I will just listen. If you say that, then you can create that path, because why? You just create a safe space for your boy,
So powerful. Yeah, so important. And yeah, and I do have to push him now to the point where I've also taken it upon myself to insert myself into, like, he does fantasy football with his friends. I'm in a chat group. I check his private chats, like DMs with his friends. I'm seeing the way that they're behaving, the way they're treating him, to make sure that there isn't something that I need to uncover. I don't like snooping, but if I feel like he wouldn't be direct with me about that, then I have to know ahead of time, because I don't want, if he's going to be sensitive to something and take drastic action because, bullying or whatever. Now, you said something fascinating, that I feel is super important to touch on, and I want to know your studies on this as well. Hardship often leads to greater success for individuals. I don't know if it's skewed more to men or women, but I know for sure that as far as entrepreneurs go, there's a greater chance of success, especially self-made success, if there was trauma, higher performers, if there was trauma or some kind of issue when you were younger. Because you've learned to self-soothe, you've learned to overcome, you've learned to work harder. Now, that could be the counter of entitlement and not needing to struggle and not needing to work hard, which is where it defaults to in a lot of people's minds. But I think psychologically it goes far deeper than that.
Yeah. I would say I've said this before, but I don't have enough statistics to really validate it. I would say we all, as entrepreneurs, at varying different degrees, you generate much more money than I do. So success is relative in certain cases. Yeah. And I think what happens is there's one or two things happening. We're either trying to prove something to ourselves, or we're trying to prove something to someone else or others. And that's what drives it behind that. And then I agree, there's probably a level of adversity or trauma. There's a term called AQ, which is called adversity quotient. And basically what that means is if you've got a high AQ, it indicates the person's capacity to endure. Now, I've done a section in the book covering this because there was a period, I lost 2 children, lost $500,000, walked out the job that I could only just be employed for, and then grinded all the way through. So I was able to use a period in time when you think everything, there was nothing left. All it come down to was you. I had like 23 days to pay the mortgage. I was unemployable. I'm mid-30s. No one wants me. I've got a string of failed businesses, etc. Lost $500,000, lost 2 children back to back. And you find the way to dig. And I think you're right. There are going to be people out there, if they generated the wealth for themselves, like yourself and other people in our community, it's generally come from a hardship. And one of them could be, I see my family broke. I don't want to go through that. And that may be what their drive is. That is their why to do that. And some people is like they may be bullied at school and gone, do you know what? I'm going to prove something to all these people one day because I'm going to be successful. I don't have a full story behind it or statistics, but I think there's 2 things. You prove to them or you're proving to yourself. One of those 2 things is what drives you to be an entrepreneur.
So that AQ that you talk about and your incredible hardship and hitting rock bottom and just feeling like there's nothing. Why do you feel you had it, and what kept you going at that point? Because at that point, a lot of men give up. What was it about you? What did you think? What were your feelings at that time? Was it never even a thought or an option?
Well, that's probably, considering I lost 2 children, that's only half the story. So I'd already been, I've already been through enough to have bite down on the gum shield to go another round. But you took it day by day.
Man.
Yeah.
It's hard to see the light sometimes. I had a pretty dark period at that point because at the time of my divorce, I hadn't met Jennifer. Our separation, and I hadn't met Jennifer, and I was broke. I had a string of failed businesses as well.
Yeah.
It was the support of my mom that I had a roof over my head. I'm 32 years old, moving back in with my mom. And my boy.
Yeah.
It was just, that was it. And if he wasn't around, that would have been a tough time for me. It already was, right?
Yeah. But that's where you've come today that, now look at what you've achieved from it and what got you here. Because back in 2018-19, you nearly got pulled under when you went from wholesale to private label. That period back then are some of the things, they say your darkest hour was just before dawn. Well, I did that for years, and so were others, and so did you. And what happens is it's a day-by-day thing, right? And now this is why I don't get stressed much in business and stuff, and you'll probably find the same to a certain degree, is that you take the worst that's ever happened to you and then you regulate that against the shit going on. It's just like, it's money, it's business. Family's more important, so that makes life going forward. So I think men have to have a passage. You don't become a man at 18. You become a man because of the level of responsibility that you carry and the way that you carry yourself. It's not about Bugattis. It's not about Rollies. It's not about all those. It comes down to your ability to cross the hardship without entitlement and still have the capacity to keep going. And I think that's what happened with you. You probably, at 32, I don't know what you was like before then, but that might have been your baptism. That is why you've got the grit to do what you do, and you operate on a level that's a fraction of the percentage of this planet. There are not many Brandon Youngs doing what you do. they're in the fractions of numbers, the level of success you've achieved. And that your drive is probably come from that. It's because you had the capacity to endure.
I appreciate that. And what I want to know is people listening to this, like we've got young men listening to this. What do you tell the 20-something-year-old, the 30-something-year-old man and if you're 20, 22 years old, you're a man. You're not a kid anymore. You gotta get that out of your head.
No, but you can still be in an infantile state.
Oh, mentally, yeah, for sure. And you've got a long way to go. I think it's an ongoing journey, even at our age, that every day we have to work on it. And we have those years of experience on that younger man. But at the end of the day, like, you got to learn that you're a man at that age. What do you tell someone who's in their dark hours? Like, they have a high school sweetheart they just broke up with, a young marriage, maybe a relationship that didn't work out, a dead-end job, or maybe no job, maybe facing homelessness, battling addiction. How do you lead someone into the right path there?
The top line is you try and identify their purpose or help them find their purpose. So I'll give you an example. I had a guy that come to me through socials, because normally these guys come to me, in DMs and stuff, because they don't publicly comment and stuff. And what I would say about this guy is he's been in and out of prison. He's got mental health issues, right? Impulse control. He's got situation where he's got, he has learning difficulty skills. He's reading, he's writing, etc. And what's happened is society has tossed him aside. And he
there. I'm just going to say, for anyone listening that has trouble reading and writing, some of the most successful people on the planet to ever live had some form of learning disability, whether where you see things backwards and you struggle with reading.
It was me. I left school. I didn't complete school. I got no qualifications. Left at 15 because I was on a life support machine, and I could barely read and write.
Yeah, and it's dyslexia, right? So, but when you're in school, you're told you're broken. And I just wanted to make this message very clear to anyone hearing this, that you're not broken. That's bullshit. Google, ask ChatGPT right now, give me the 10 most successful people with dyslexia. You're going to get a list that are 10 of the most successful and richest men to ever live, that have created incredible empires. You're talking about people like Richard Branson, right? So you're not broken. It's a superpower in its own way because of the way that you see things and the way that you can self-reflect. So I just wanted to pause right there for that interjection, because I think that a lot of people are down on themselves, and that self-think is so fucking important, right? You can't think of yourself in a negative way. You just have to understand yourself and be realistic about your abilities and what you can accomplish, and understand what it's going to take to get to the next level by being specific and measurable and understanding leading activities and growth.
Yeah.
But you're not broken. Sorry.
You also think about things a different way, because you have to work around your limited skill set, because it doesn't exist. So if you're like me and other people, left school and didn't, no qualifications, couldn't read or write properly, and that to develop that, one, you end up becoming a late developer in learning. But the other thing is you think about things differently because you haven't gone the traditional route, because you've had to cope. You used to use coping mechanisms to work around those things. So the way that you think would be slightly different, whether that's good or bad, but that might lead to success in one side because you're thinking a lot different to others because you're working around your limitations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I'm sorry. Like, you can go back to your previous thought. I'm sorry if you didn't lose it.
No, it's fine, because we brought up that he couldn't read and write properly, and society had tossed him aside. And so I worked out with him. We worked out in about 30 minutes what his purpose was. He wants to get access to see his daughter, right? But in order to get to see his daughter, he has to have a proper job, like work full time, stay out of prison and all that. And we discussed it. And since that day, he's got, I see his private Instagram posting his training videos, out running in the gym, learning better coping skills for reading and writing, because one day he's going to get his daughter back. So in order to keep him on the path, he used his purpose of access to his daughter to get a relationship with her. It gave him something to live for. So I think with people that are depressed, if you look at a lot of people that are depressed, put a chemical depression aside, because I don't want to offend anyone, take a chemical depression aside. If you look at a lot of depressed people, maybe they just don't have a lot going on in their life, so they feel sad. And if you feel sad, it's generally because you've got a lack of options of
but also
things to do,
Yeah, well, the other thing is that what people do is they look for escapes instead of facing it, instead of fixing it. They have short-term escapes that only compound or make it that linger. So video gaming, connecting with people into a group of locally or online that you don't really know, right? Like I know a lot of gamers, and years pass by and they make these pseudo friendships with people that live across the world, but their situation doesn't get any better. They're just doing what they can to get by, and it's an addiction. It'd be no different than a drug addict who only works so that they can get the money to feed that addiction. And to me, that's a sad way to live. People might criticize my thought here, like my statement here, because the natural reflex from people that are hearing this, that are going to be critical of it, are going to be, you know what, if that makes them happy, who am I to judge? But that person is not healthy. That person's not mentally healthy. They're not physically healthy. They're not healthy if all they do and think about is, I work my 9 to 5. I make enough money to pay my bills. I go home and I play video games. That's not the life we were intended to live.
Exactly. And then you start to introduce an addiction to porn and things like that, which is very prevalent today. If you take an 18-year-old to between 18 and 30 men of today, I think 30% of them are still, 33% are either virgins or haven't been active and had sex in the last 12 months or so.
And that's statistically significantly higher than any other period that we know about.
Yeah, because 10 years ago, I think it was like 15%. So what's happened is online has been great to connect the world, but we've become disconnected as humans.
Which is, you can talk to them virtually like we are.
Yeah.
But you're not interacting.
You're not interacting. There's no feel. There's no presence really. Like with COVID, when everyone got shut down, think about the oxytocin that's shared by shaking someone's hand, giving them a hug, their feel-good factor. You lose all of that through isolation, don't you? In the extreme, And I think we've become much more isolated, and I think this is what led to mental health problems as well. Because you got
now, I'm also going to get criticized for this, because I'm going to say that I've got to be very careful here. The normalization of people who want to be disconnected or different is a problem in society, right? Because again, I'm being told, F you, if that makes them happy. But there's a deeper issue mentally, psychologically, and with society that we need to solve, to where that shouldn't be human nature. We should want to interact and be together and be social. And so I'll just have to leave it at that, because I don't want to offend, people at certain groups or anything, because I don't intend that. There are definitely outliers and cases where that's normal and that's okay. But I think that where it comes from and the prevalence of it is that lack of interaction.
Yeah. I think that makes difficult for relationships, especially youngsters that are planning to get married. Dating's become a lot less prevalent today for younger generation. If you look at dating apps, if you look at something like Tinder, on dating apps there, I think it's 75% on there, something like 66% are men, 33% are women. And then because you've got all the filters, height and stuff like that, it limits some of the other guys. So it's, women swipe about 50%, 3 to 5% of the time, men swipe 50%. So it's a numbers game for guys on there, and then that can build into their mental health.
Of course, yeah. And then there's a hierarchy, right? It's like the men want to, the men will take anyone, cast a wide net, they say, right? And, especially
if you look at evolutional psychology,
the women are only going to go this way or up, right?
Yeah, hypergamy. Women go across and up the competence hierarchy. And you've got to understand, the guys would have problems with this. Women need, and often do in most cases, are choosy. Why? Because reproduction costs are very expensive for women.
For them.
You marry the wrong guy who's an idiot, you could be plunged into insecure financially, right? You don't know who you're marrying with and whether they change over time. So you have huge risk. And so, of course, you must be more choosy. But I'd also try and encourage men to raise their own standards.
Right.
Because a lot of guys would be quick to talk about get discipline, get on your cut, get in the gym, do all these different things, be disciplined. But they never talk about the discipline you need downstairs as well.
Oh.
Yeah, so they talk about discipline everywhere apart from down there. And there's one thing that women can't stand, and that's thirsty men. And that's the number one resource on the planet. And this is why we have OnlyFans and stuff like that, because of thirsty, lonely men, and because the interaction to get there is a lot easier, right?
Right.
There's no judgment there on the lady side. Why? Because they're making money. Good luck to them. But that's not conducive. They're actually providing the service for lonely men, but it's mainly for lonely men who don't want to go out to the world and put the effort in, so therefore they can stay home and log in on the computer. But that's not going to be healthy long term.
I want to go down that path because I think it's so important. So Charlie Munger says, if you want a lovely mate, become worthy of a lovely mate.
You have to become worthy. Exactly.
You have to become worthy. And so a lot of people don't work on themselves. Exactly what you're saying. That, you know what? If you want that better, smarter, more successful, harder working, you want, a loyal, good woman, you have to be worthy of that yourself. And so the biggest mindset shift for me over the last few years is not to be a people pleaser or a partner pleaser. And because all you're going to do is end up with disappointment. Why doesn't that work when I'm doing everything for you? That's the mindset that people have, and it all it does is constantly lead to disappointment and to anger and to depression and to fighting.
And that comes from your childhood.
That's not what a woman wants.
No, she doesn't want codependency.
No, she doesn't want codependency. She wants a man who's a man who is independent. And so what you need to do is you need to work on yourself for her.
No, you need to work on yourself for you, and that she gets the benefit because of your confidence. Women enjoy confidence and competence, okay? And they are an attractive traits as well. If you're needy, it's very difficult for a woman. Why? Because of the safety mechanism gets kicked in. If you're needy, it's like, oh, how's you going to protect me on a biological level? Look, we've had 15 years of Facebook, and we've had hundreds of thousands of years of biology. It ain't changed that much.
No.
It hasn't changed. If you look at the studies and Dr. David Buss and read the books, and you see it open, your new set of eyes open up for everyday life. And people will challenge it. They go, yeah, it's just data. And I'm like, you're talking about 15 years of Facebook. We're talking hundreds of thousands of years of evolution of biology, right?
Yeah.
And women need to feel safe.
Of course.
They can be the hardest, kung fu expert, but they still want to feel safe. Right. Regardless.
Now, God forbid, right? Our relationships don't work out, you and me, right? Tomorrow, we
Yeah.
would have a line out the door of women that were wanting to suit, to be with us. Now, it's not because we're millionaires. It's because of the work we've put on ourselves. Now, there are people who attract the wrong women because they have money, and there
Mm.
are like that's definitely a thing, right?
Mm.
And you can see that when you've got the overweight slob that can't control himself and is worth millions and millions of dollars, and he's
Yeah.
got the much younger woman. That's different.
You're not going to get genuine burning desire, and that's what really you want in a relationship. You don't want a trophy wife. You don't want to, and I mean it
No,
respectfully, and you don't want to mail order bride respectfully. It's not healthy for you because
right?
whilst a guy has to become, right? So we can't just be loved and be a layabout and do nothing. Men have to be and have to do, right? We have to do something. And so I don't, going back to the line out the door, that might be a bit of a stretch because we're not Drake. But what you're actually saying is women look around and they want to date across and up, right? And so rightly so, they're picky and they should be.
But not
Right.
just based on looks.
It's
You have to
not.
give the criteria there.
Yeah, you've got status, right? You've got is he conscientious? Kindness is a big one. Being in shape is handy. Does make a difference in a physical intimacy.
You need
versus,
physical attraction to some extent.
you need physical attraction, and this is why we shouldn't shame women on this as well. Because when a lady, because I've got all the studies, I'm putting it all in the book.
It's chemistry and it's biology for sure.
Well, if you look at biology, right, then we can get into this a little bit more. Now, when a guy, right, we look at a woman and go, fall in love with our eyes, right? So you could argue that women fall in love with their ears, right?
Yeah.
So a guy falls in love with the eyes and he sees a beautiful woman and in his eyes, let's take a biological aspect to it. In terms of reproduction, there are mating, there are two mates here, a man and a woman, right? And they've both got mating strategies, whether that's long-term or short-term. Now, if a lady sees a guy and he's got a strong upper chest, arms, etc., what that is kind of saying on a biological level, here is a healthy mate for healthy offspring. When a guy sees the lady with the hips and the chest and the backside and the lips and stuff, they are all signs of beauty in terms of reproduction as well.
Right.
Do you understand? So when we look at on a surface level, that's different to a biological level. So if you look at it on the biological level, both parties are going, that looks like a healthy mate. She has childbearing hips, therefore, she'll be great to have, wonderful children with. She looks at the guy and says, he's strong, okay? He's strong, big arm, he can protect him, and it's more than that in our monkey brain. There's more to it. But if you look at the features and you break it down in these books, when you see the hip to waist ratio, the chest and the lips, the backside, when you look at that, that's all woven into biology in terms of looking for a healthy mate that can produce and survive a healthy offspring. Because pregnancy is really dangerous still. Regardless, as I said, we've lost two of our children. It's tough on a woman's body, So on a biological level, they might go in, that's a healthy mate. So it's not just about like big chest, big muscles and all that. It's not that. But there are certain criterias that we look for. It's like that person, that human there looks healthy, but you may not realize it on a conscious level.
I think that people need to understand the men that are listening to this. Like I'll target just the men. I mean, it goes both ways and we have to be sensitive to that. They're quick to blame others. A lot of the men, right? They're quick to think that it's someone else's fault when something bad happens or when they don't get what they want. And if they spend, maybe it's not fast because everyone wants instant gratification too. But if you spent the next year, 3 years, 4 years working on yourself, whether it's a trade, being in the gym, meditation, journaling, understanding yourself at a higher level, becoming the best version of yourself and getting on that journey, those things will naturally come to you. You'll find yourself in your environment wanting to be around more people that are doing what you're doing, and you'll naturally start to get better. So what I talked about with the New Year's resolution video that I put out, that I had a lot of private messages about, which is around the hardest thing, and the reason that most people fail in their New Year's resolutions is not because they don't want to become better and want to do those things. It's because they don't change their environment. Who you hang out with, what's in your house, where you go, what you're doing, where you're working, what you're doing when you're not at work. And if you don't change those core things, you can't expect a different outcome of becoming a different person. So you need to make major changes, not just with mindset and going to the gym a few days a week. That's just going to get you a little bit better until it doesn't, until you fall back into the same habits.
Do you know what people need to kind of work out? The world doesn't change around you. You do. Your
Absolutely.
outcomes come from the changes that you make. If the
You
world,
make.
you
And
make.
you're in control of that. 100%.
You are in control of that. You're in
People
control.
feel stuck. People feel stuck. And I really want to emphasize that. You might live in a small town. You grew up in a city. You've got the people around you that you know, that you grew up with. You know what? You're not stuck there. It's a huge world. It's a huge place for you to go visit. Get on a train or a bus and go visit. Figure out a way to go visit other towns, other places, join a club, go to meetup.com, go to a free meetup into a different environment, different city, different town to meet new people. And realize how small your town is and how small your bubble is versus the world. And realize what's possible. You're not stuck. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the changes start with you, because I think what people try and do, first things first, you've got to live in an objective reality. And I know that, you know, projection is perception, etc., etc. But we know there's the distance between reality and delusion. And if you live in a delusion, you're always going to be in this bubble of this delusion. And when the world doesn't give you what you want in terms of entitlement, it tells you. And especially prevalent for men. This is why we've got lots of men on the street and, you know, high ratio of men in prison and stuff like that. It can be very coarse for men. Not saying that women are not effective, far from it. But statistically, you know, most, you know, violent crimes and murders are of men. You know, most people on the street are men, etc., etc. So I have to say to guys, look, what you must understand is that every bit of feedback that you're receiving at the moment, right, is in correlation to what your output is. Now, if you want to change the way that the world is around you, you can't use latent narcissism and live in a shared fantasy with all the other people and then determine and bend reality to your will, because it's not going to happen. That just becomes a level of entitlement, and it's hard for some people to grasp and swallow that. What you have to do is you go, I haven't got this. What do I need to do? Oh, I'll go and do that. And then I have to do it over a long time and be consistent with it and stick with it. It's very simple. It's very simple to say it. It's harder to do that, right?
Now,
we control. Yeah.
There's obviously some people out there that are talking to men.
Yeah.
A lot of what they say is bad.
Especially on dating advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially on the dating side. What do you think of Jordan Peterson?
Do you know what? And people probably dislike this. I love Jordan Peterson. There's so much he says that is good. I find it quite interesting, like, because he's an intellectual, right? So let's just say, you know, there's that famous quote, you should be weak, you shouldn't be, etc., etc. You should be a monster and have it under control. Bit weird seeing a little guy like that who's never been in the ring or had a fight or anything. But in essence, he's right. If Jocko Willink said it, we're having a new conversation.
Oh, yeah.
But I do like Jordan, and I do like his daughter, Michaela, and some of the stuff that she does. You know, I'm impressed by the man, and I know that he'll share certain views, but I think a lot of what he's done and said has been distorted. I think there's a lot of young men they've changed their lives. Even to when he goes, just go and make your bed. Even those kind of messages to young boys. And now what he's doing, he's selling out arena tours because the education system kind of worked against him in Canada, tried to force him to communicate,
conform,
and conform a certain way. And he didn't want to do that, and that's fine. So he left, and now he's become a major success. If you go to these events he does now, because he's smart, he wears a suit, he's like, present yourself well, stand up straight, bring the shoulders back. These are all fucking basic things that everyone should do to a certain degree, right? But now you've got
that's the problem. The reason that he's become popular is because we lost that as a society, right?
We lost it as a society. I did a podcast the other day with Isabella. I've done a part of the Men Plus 40 series. I'm doing a runner podcast where I bring in women from around the world that I'm friends with, and we discuss a lot of different topics. And one of the main things that we discussed was chivalry. I want to bring back chivalry. I want to bring back because I do open the car door, be polite, and everything else. But people are like weird around it because of the way that society has changed. And one thing I want to make clear is that, let's say for every 200 women that you open the door for, one might call you toxic and say, I don't need your help, I'm not weak. Cool. Let that roll off your shoulders, because the other 199, you've put a smile on their face and made their day better, as long as it's sincere. Do it because you want to do it. It's nothing other than being polite, being a gentleman.
You don't want anything in return. It's just you want to be the best version of yourself, and that's who you are.
Yeah. So open the door.
You have to do things because that's who you are.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset that people need.
Because that's what my mum taught me. My mum taught me about that,
Exactly. Yeah. But if someone's listening to this, they didn't have a mom teach them that. It's
or a father,
Yeah, or a father to teach them that.
Yeah.
What you need to understand, if you're hearing this, is that if you want to change your life, immediately in your mind, you need to get rid of all the other bullshit. And from now on, you do things because that's the person you are.
Yeah.
I am a person that does that thing, and that's why I do it.
Yeah.
There's no other reason. And so that mindset shift is not, I am Brandon, and I want to start to maybe try to experiment to become someone. No, you have to change immediately in your mind that this is who you are. You are that person that does that thing. You are the person that opens doors for women. You are the person that studies and works on themselves. You're the person that takes an hour a day to read, or an hour a day to listen to philosophy, or to write, or to exercise. You are that person.
Yeah.
That makes it so there's no opportunity for you not to do it.
Yeah. Now, look, the one thing I do understand is you've got to have boundaries. And this is a lot of guys do have, talk slightly about codependency and having porous boundaries, but equally you've got to respect other people's boundaries. And you also got to understand is two big burly guys walk up to and open the door for a lady is like, whoa, so it's context as well. You're not going to run down the street and see a cab and go, I must open that door for that lady. It's just it's naturally, right? So you walk into an office building or whatever, you open the door, you let them through. It could be a lady with a frame, a mature lady, or it could be a young lady. It could be a lady in the bit. It doesn't matter. The point is, you're showing respect, and what you'll find from that, you get most of the time you get a little smile back. You don't know how that person's day's been. You could have just made their day, because in their mind they've had a shitty time, and they go, do you know what? I don't know that person, but wasn't that nice? And that shifts their mood to a better place. Is there anything wrong with that? And that's why I see it's so important. Doing things like that is a random act of kindness, but it has to come from a sincere place.
And it's true. The rule of the universe is the more you give, the more you receive.
Yeah.
But you can't do it because you want to receive.
Absolutely. It's not a game. You don't put it in a spreadsheet. You do it because that's who you are.
Well, Danny, I know that we've been chatting for a long time. I know that we can continue to do that. And The other saying I'll say is that those who teach learn.
Hmm.
You have podcasts. You privately coach, men and help a lot of people through studying, becoming better yourself, and through helping others. You have naturally become better yourself as well.
Hmm.
And I've seen the growth,
Thank you.
I'm proud to call you my friend.
You too.
You're an inspiration. So
Thank you.
thank you for agreeing to chat a little bit about something that isn't Amazon.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about something that's a little bit more real. How can people listen to you, find your resources? What's the other podcasts you have, or reach out to you?
Yeah, I haven't posted much on Insta this year, end of last year, because I've been working on the book. So I'm about 35,000 words in. We'll drop to the publisher the first draft on 1st of February. So should hit about 50,000 words. So I've not really made time to post, but as of yesterday, I've started to do weekly podcasts. So just do a search for Men Plus 40 on Instagram. But really, the new content that's going to be dropping now, because I took a gap to work on the book, will be the podcast. So just all the normal podcatchers like iTunes, etc. Do a search for Men Plus 40. And we just dropped Isabella's show yesterday, which is called Male and Female Dynamics. And I've got a series where I ask similar questions to 10 different women over time, because I want to show you the dynamics of women. When you look at this online stuff and you talk about hypergamy, and they're all talking body count and just to get clicks and eyeballs, so it sets the tone that all women are this way. It's not. It's because what they're trying to do, they create these podcasts by bringing women on and then try and shame them. And they'll bring them in from, the porn industry or OnlyFans, and they're not every day. So what they do is try and make a mockery of them. It's like Jerry Springer kind of thing. So what I do is I ask some of these similar questions in a respectful way, and then we have dialogue on it, right? And the idea is that if you listen to each of the podcasts, you get different answers. Things like, what does it mean to you when you ask your man to be vulnerable? Or what does it mean to you? What is a connection? You ask a lot of women, they talk about having a connection with their partner. A lot of guys miss that. Yeah. And they don't understand the difference between vulnerability, right? Where you open up to your partner on certain things. There are certain things that you need to do. Vulnerability isn't coming home every night and crying because you hate your job and then don't do nothing about it, and then she gets pissed off at you. That's not vulnerability.
No.
Do you understand? And it's trying to explain the difference. So check out those podcasts. The idea is to bring men and women closer together, have better relationships, have long-term relationships. We're in a hookup culture now, fast food and everything else. But the goal that all men should go for, one, is you need your peace, which you cultivate yourself, and you want a woman with you by your side, if you're heterosexual, that has genuine desire for you.
That's seems like a formula for happiness and a goal for all of us, I think. What are I'll just ask you one question in closing.
Yeah.
What are 3 books that everyone listening should read right away? Like the next 3 books.
The next 3 books in terms if we're focusing on the men culture.
Yeah.
I would King, Warrior, Magician, Lover is a book I would select. It's around Jungian psychology. So it's like a Venn diagram. So the king could be the man that looks after his people, or it could be the high chair tyrant. So it's like it gives you the full Venn of, what the difference between a warrior and a hero. Well, a hero serves himself. So you understand from a psychological aspect, which is being mapped out based on Jungian psychology. The other one is called Evolution of Desire by Dr. David Buss. That's another good book. And whilst it's not a men's book, I always say to people, The Art of War. It's one of the greatest, I call it one of the greatest life and business books of all time.
100%.
And they're 3 things. If you can read all 3 of those, it's different from the general, like these kind of, I love David Goggins, but, people would suggest like his book and a Tim Ferriss book. What I'm trying to give you is slightly different. So Evolution of Desire by Dr. David Buss. King, Warrior, Lover, Magician, which is a very rare book. And then The Art of War, Sun Tzu.
I have some reading to do, my friend.
Indeed.
Hey,
All right.
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Take care.